If you're here looking for Dex, he'll be here in a minute. We are running behind schedule.
I want to welcome everybody to the live feed. We've never done this before, obviously, but we're running a little behind schedule, so just hang in there with us. Thank you. Oh, I have two people. Awesome.
So far, yeah.
Awesome. Well, acknowledgement to the two people in the live room. We're not chatting, but you're welcome to contribute appropriate comments to the feed.
Right, and you'll see them later.
And I'll see them later and reply to them.
All right, well, thanks for joining us at the Leather Culture Club Northeast. And our mission here is kink and kindness and education. So everything we do is driven by education, history, and old traditions mixed in with new traditions that we are creating at the Leather Culture Club, who our parent group is in South Florida. And we are very honored today to have the covered master Dex, who basically is a renaissance man of the BDSM realm. You name the skill set, and I can guarantee you it's in his tool bag. And if you find a skill set that somehow isn't in his tool bag, he will do the research and he will have it perfected before you know it. I call him my leather brother because he is that. And I've had the honor of co-teaching with him, co-putting on shows with him, and just sharing air and life. And for the work that he is doing on his YouTube channels is just an amazing gift that he's given to the larger community and the world. And with no further ado, I welcome Dex, Master Dex.
Well, so it's kind of strange being live on your channel and being an invited guest at an event, but I guess stranger things have happened, so I have to put myself over here so that I'm in the camera. I didn't really prepare a whole lot because I didn't really know what to prepare for. I think the one thing I want to communicate is that I think my leather journey is unique, but I guarantee you, every person in here, that your leather journey's been unique. Is there anybody in the audience, we're not going to put cameras on anybody, but is there anybody that would like to share how they got interested in leather or BDSM? The terms aren't synonymous, but we're going to kind of use them interchangeably today. So who could tell us how they got interested in leather? The very first time. Because I'm going to share my story, but I want to hear some other stories first. Anybody?
Do you want us to come up?
You could just, as long as you speak clearly, I think the microphone's pretty good on an iPhone.
So, I don't consider myself part of the lifestyle. I consider my BDSM to be my orientation. It's been who I am from the very beginning. And while leather wasn't always part of the start of that, it was more a desire for a master-slave relationship with a secondary for sadism. The leather journey started somewhere after I got started in BDSM for real. I took my first slave in 1981, and as is so often the case, in between the start and where I am today, there was a vanilla marriage, which was a terrible mistake. But here I am back, and now all three of those components are equally tied together.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? How did you get first interested in kink, or when did you recognize for the very first time you were kinky? Yeah.
Well, when I was a little kid, we played cowboys and Indians and tie each other up with a jump rope, stuff like that.
Okay.
Just tie up Barbie to Mr. and Mrs. Mouse's bed.
I hadn't remembered that, but yeah, I did a little of that with my nephews.
My mom had tarot cards, and there was one picture of a girl on the beach with a blindfold on and her hair blowing, and she's on the sword, tied up to the sword. And that card, I would stare at it. It was all dog-eared, but from like holding so much.
Right.
I just always had a.
The damsel in distress, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a whole, early bondage genre, was damsel in distress. Everyone remember that? And we've kind of migrated from that in rope since then, but that was a genre for a long time. Okay. Well, it's funny because, I mean, I could share childhood stories. They're not real great, but a lot of people's kinks related to their childhood, and I don't want to get into psychology because I'm not a psychologist, but to just be blunt, my mother was a vanilla sadist, and so I always tell people I was a mistake. I was born in 1955, and she was 45. And my sister was 22 years and 2 days older than me, and my mother and my sister were pregnant at the same time. So I have a nephew that's about 6 months younger than me. And so that's how I came around. I was born as a surprise, I think, to Mom, and she took it out on me most of my childhood, or it felt like that. So a normal routine for me as a kid, I would get in trouble, I would get beaten and locked in the bathroom until I confessed as to what I'd done wrong. And if I didn't know what I'd done wrong, then every hour she would come back in and beat me again. So that was kind of growing up. So, I grew up, got married young. How young? Anyone in here get married when they were 16 besides me? I got married when I was 16 mainly to get away from the family. And my dad was brave enough to sign the paperwork, which my mom never let him live that down. So now we've gone way, way back, right? But that was a childhood. So a lot of times when you're that young and you don't understand relationships, I really think leather has helped me understand relationships. Well, you shared your insight into your relationship came through relationships, DS types of relationships, and leather. So leather definitely helps us define our relationships and understand who we are. Okay, but at 16 years of age, most of us don't know who the heck we are. We're still learning, right? So of course, I was attracted to and married someone who was very much emotionally and of makeup like my mother. So it wasn't a great marriage, but 20 years into that marriage, I decided there needed to be a change. So I went through a divorce and a remarriage. And in the remarriage, I had married another dominant, didn't know it because I wasn't viewing the world from the paradigm of dominance and submission or master and slave. I didn't have that paradigm, that insight yet. So I married somebody else that was a dominant and didn't realize it, but it was a transactional relationship. Does everyone know what I mean by transactional relationship? So we'll get it down to the brass tacks. That relationship was transactional based on sex. The last year I was married to her, we had sex on Thanksgiving and April Fool's Day, twice in the year, okay? And at some point when you're in your mid-40s, some of us have migrated beyond mid-40s, but somewhere when you're in your mid-40s and you only have transactional sex twice a year, the light bulb goes on in your head and goes, something must be wrong with me. I thought something was wrong with me. So literally, I got online, and at the time, and it may still exist, I don't know, because once I met Moodstone, I kind of quit looking for partners, but I got online and went on Adult Friend Finders. Everybody remember that old website? Alt was the mirror site. Adult Friend Finders was for the hookups, and the swingers and stuff. So I searched for a hookup in Phoenix, Arizona. I was going to a conference. I was a college professor. I had an academic conference I was going to, and I wanted to determine whether something was wrong with me or something was wrong with the relationship, as simple as that may sound. So I got a hookup on Adult Friend Finders, and we got lucky one night in a hotel, and I guess it was okay because the next night she asked if she could come back and do it again, do a do-over. I'm like, hell yeah. So the next night, she comes in with this little suitcase, and she opens it up, and candles come out, and a little boom box comes out, and then handcuffs come out, and then a paddle comes out, and a blindfold comes out. And this was all new. I mean, this was completely new. I had no idea, right? So that was my first introduction to kink. Was the second night of a weekend stand off of an adult friend finder's hookup. Believe it or not. True story. So when we were done, she said, when you go back to Virginia, I don't do long-term relationships. You need to find your local munch group and go to a munch and meet some people, some real people, and continue to explore, right? So that's what I did. She messaged me for about a week after that and then cut me off, right? Anybody here from Hampton Roads, Virginia? Good, then you won't know if I tell anything that's not true or that's a little off, because this is my recollection, right? And it's been like 25 years. So, you know, some things change, some things don't change. But at the time in Hampton Roads, I was living in Hampton, Virginia. At the time in Hampton, Virginia, there was an Anchor Munch group. And it was in the early days of the internet. How many here remember 14.5 kilobaud modems, dial-up modems?
Yes.
And you would dial up and it would take 2 minutes for a web page to build. And you actually had to send very short emails with no attachments, otherwise you couldn't communicate at all, right? That was the beginning of my leather journey. So literally the website was bare bones, and the only real information on the website about the munch was to write the web mistress for more information, right? And it took like 3 or 4 emails just to squeeze out of her the location of the munch, which happened to be a Mongolian barbecue, you know, in Hampton, Virginia. It's not there anymore. But, so you go to the munch, and I walk in and I sat down by this lady, because she just looked welcoming, which was a mistake, because she turned around and looked at me and she said, "That's my slave seat. You can sit there." So, sure, follow your last order first, right? So I moved around the table and sat down. And Mistress June ended up becoming one of my best friends. She spent hours and hours and hours sitting with me at her feet, teaching me about the lifestyle for the next year after that. Her and Mistress Dory were my biggest mentors in that first year. So the Anchor Munch group, like most munch groups, met once a month, right? But everyone remember when they first got interested in kink? Was once a month enough? No. Once a month was not enough, okay? So on the other side of the bay, on the Virginia Beach side, was Tide. Tide's an acronym. Tidewater Individuals Exploring Dominance or something. I forget what it all stood for, but it was Tide, right? And Tide was a group that had kind of modeled themselves. It was like a miniature Black Rose. They were a 501c3. They had voted in, officers every year. They had annual dues. And they ran a munch, and they ran a play party once a month. They rented like a conference room in a hotel. In Virginia, the hotelry laws kind of protect kinky people. And as long as you're rented into a hotel, you're kind of more or less safe from prying eyes. So, of course, once a month wasn't enough for me, so I had to go across the the river and joined tide. So now I had 2 munches a month and a play party. Is that enough?
Nope.
Hell no. Okay. So the family that ran the Anchor Munch in Hampton, Virginia, okay, was a leather master, Master Rusty, and he had 3 slaves that lived in the house. They ran House Phoenix, okay? So you had Slave Laura, Madame Sylvia, and Lord help me, I can't remember the gentleman's name that was the male slave. But they hosted a chat. Well, this was the days before the online chats. So what was a chat in the real leather days? A chat was on Wednesday night because in Hampton Roads, Virginia, you're in the middle of the Bible Belt. And instead of going to prayer meeting, you go to Wednesday night chat over at House Phoenix. And everybody sat around on a floor in the living room and they would have a different topic every night, every Wednesday night. Okay, you weren't allowed to arrive early. You had to arrive in vanilla attire. They taught you what public rules of conduct were. Once you were inside the house, you could change, just like I changed here. I'll change before I leave. Okay, coming to and from that house, you didn't have any exposed toys or collars or cuffs or anything that would out to the neighbors. Right? You had to be careful where you parked. Because really, I mentioned parking, but out of all the groups that I've known that have gotten themselves in trouble with the authorities, 9 times out of 10 it's parking. Some neighbor calls and complains about parking, and the cops show up. Okay, and then it kind of goes downhill after that. That's what happened to a group in Lakeland, Florida when I first moved to Florida. It was parking, wasn't anything else. So at any rate, where was I? Oh, Wednesday night chat. Okay. Well, when you go every Wednesday night to a chat and you go to 2 munches a month and you go to a play party once a month, and okay, House Phoenix, in addition to the Wednesday night chats, they had an educational workshop every month. Okay. They called, and it was really only with that house, but I kind of adopted the structure. When you go to a munch and it's vanilla attire and no collars are allowed and it's pretty much public rules of conduct, you don't out the group in public. Back in the day, everyone was a computer group or some kind of social networking group, right? That was a level 1 event, okay? So instantly, if they put out, this was back in the days of listservs on private servers. Everyone remember listservs? This is before some of your time even. Okay, a listserv is like a mail list that runs off of a server. You don't see them much anymore because the spam filters kind of filter them out. But a lot of the spam we get in our email now is actually driven off old technology. It's listserv technology, and they're just shooting ads to us. Okay, but in the day, you could take a list and you could email everybody on the list. So that the key was getting your name put on the list. And then making sure, once the filter started filtering out listservs, you had to make sure that your email was, or that the listserv's address was in your address book. Otherwise, it would get filtered out, right? So I'm kind of digressing. But they ran a level 2 event, which was an educational event. So level 1 events were munches. Level 2 events were educational events. Level 3 events were like the Black Rose Convention. No sex in the dungeon, but dungeon play. Full dungeon play, but no sex in the dungeon. Vibrators, dildos, those kinds of things were okay, but not penetrative sex. So when you see a dungeon like that, like the Woodshed Orlando, most of the dungeons that in my area of Florida are like that, those in my paradigm, because of where I came in Hampton Roads, that's a level 3 dungeon. I just automatically classify it that way. And I know what I can and can't do in that dungeon. Okay? On one end of that spectrum, negotiations are very easy because you don't have any expectations of sex or any kind of sex involved in it. So it makes negotiations much easier, I think, for play or pickup play. Well, then what's a level 4 dungeon? pretty much anything goes. Some level 4 dungeons will limit golden showers and that kind of play unless there's shower facilities around. You know, there's still some limitations sometimes in a level 4 dungeon. Okay, so we had level 1 events, munches. We had level 2 events, chats. We had level and the chats and the workshop demos, and we had play parties. Well, House Phoenix ran a play party too. So now it was up to 2 munches, 4 chats, 1 educational workshop, and 2 play parties a month. And on Friday night, if there was nothing going on, we would go over to Mistress June's house and just sit on the floor and let her hold court. I called it holding court because she would gather everybody around and just teach. She would just teach us, right? And we learned an awful lot. Trust me, we did. So when you're brand new, well, I don't want to categorize people, but I will. There's nothing wrong with any categories of people. All people are good. We love everybody, right? But the reality of life is we have to figure out a way to put food on the table and a roof over our head. So some people are in jobs that are career jobs. They have to be very careful when they enter the leather lifestyle that they don't out themselves. They pick up scene names. They kind of guard their careers and protect their careers and try to provide a buffer between their careers and their true interests, true lifestyle interests. Then there's people like me now that are retired that I'm on a fixed income. It's hopefully pretty steady. I don't have to worry about that anymore, but I do have to worry because if I'm not careful with public rules of conduct, I could hurt some of the people that still have careers, still have things to worry about. Because I was over in that category for a long time. Then you have people that are on disabilities for one reason or another. They have fixed, steady income, right? So they're kind of almost in the retiree category. Then you have another category in the lifestyle that I bumped into, which I'm going to categorize as professionals. They're pros. They're trying to make a living off of leather, off of BDSM, and play and what I'd call temporary relationships. And then you have another category even, which I'm going to call vendors. These are people that are craftsmen, leather workers, really gifted, talented people that are trying to make a living off of making stuff that supports the lifestyle. And some of these vendors actually have day jobs too. They're working, they're hustling, working multiple jobs. So you have all these categories of people that come together. And at least in Hampton Roads, Virginia, this was like 25 years ago. It took me 4 emails just to get to go to the munch, okay? And then I was told to sit right there, okay? So it became very obvious after one munch that as a male who perceived themselves as dominant, I needed to have someone under my shoulder, under my wing. Otherwise, I wasn't going to progress very far. So, back to alt, not adult friend fighters, but got on alt, probably wrote 400 emails. By my second munch, I had a submissive, or at least a lady that was willing to go with me to the munch, right? Okay, but I was still married. That's an issue. So they clearly told me at the munch, you cannot progress this way. Your wife has to know, otherwise you're not going to be welcome in our group. Your wife has to know, you have to be open with her, everything has to be cool, right? So literally over the next year, I'm going to compress this, over the next year, I went through marriage counseling with my wife. We came to a conclusion where we mutually agreed that we needed to divorce. I entered a deeper relationship with the lady that I'd met online, and I took her through a blue collar of consideration for 30 days where we were just kind of feeling each other out. Moved her into a red collar, training collar for a year. It was actually about 13 months. And then right at the end of that period, we went through a formal collaring, and she put on my black leather collar. And we signed a contract and did the whole 9 yards, all the way from pricking our fingers with roses and mixing blood and having a formal ceremony in Miss June's backyard. It was a big deal, and it was beautiful. But along that road, right, everybody remember when you jump back and you're brand new and you don't know anything and everything's exciting, I managed to out myself at work inadvertently, but it still happened, right? Once you're outed at work and you're in a GS-12 position, and this was back in the day when all it took was someone to raise their hand and go, well, I feel sexually harassed at work. Just the knowledge that this guy's kinky is sexual harassment. So, went through all that, changed jobs. At the same time, all this was going on, I was working on my doctorate, my PhD at GW, believe it or not, and adjuncting in the evening at Hampton University. So crazy busy, right? Crazy busy. So about a year and a half into this journey, I got a job offer. I came up and interviewed at the College of St. Rose, and they said, oh, we want you to come teach. And I was like, wow, yes, full-time professor. Have to be careful, right? I'd already been outed once. When you have 105 graduate hours and you're outed and you have to change your academic path, right? There's only so many times you can change your academic path until you find yourself throwing newspapers for a job, right? Everyone's shaking their head at that one, right? So when I moved to Albany, I said, I've been doing this for a year and a half now. Now I need to be smarter about this and be careful and listen to what Mistress June taught me about public rules of conduct and take that seriously, right? So I come to Albany and go to my first munch, and one of the first words out of someone's mouth was, what do you do for a living? Okay, well, in Hampton, Virginia, no one would have asked anybody what they did for a living in that leather community. That was not the first question you asked, right? So I think I told some little white lie that I was a writer, did something like that, but it wasn't the truth, okay? But the light bulb went off on my head that I needed to be careful. I was in a new community. I didn't know anybody. They didn't know me. And I was in a new job. And I needed to be careful. So I went to the munches, and at the time, and I don't know how many people have been in this area for a long time, but at the time, like about 20 years ago, Albany Stocks and Bonds was the group in Albany, and Ed ran it. And Ed was a great guy, but Ed was a deer hunter. So literally there would be munches every month for about 6 months. And then when deer season hit, Ed would go deer hunting, and the group wouldn't do anything for the next probably 6 months, because I think he bow hunted and muzzle loaded and did, if it involved shooting a deer, Ed was involved in it. Okay, great guy. But it wasn't what I was used to. Right? I was used to a Wednesday chat, a munch twice a month, 2 play parties every month. And this was in this was in the center of the Bible Belt where there were no dungeons, right? And how there were house parties. That's all there were. There were no public dungeons. So I built a small dungeon in my attic, and I started hosting a house party every month. Okay? And invited people that I met at the munch. And it was really kind of risky. Looking back on it, you would go, I was nuts. Because I don't know if you know Albany, but this was on Partridge Street, and this was in a house that I was renting from the college. As a college professor, I had built an attic dungeon, and when they would come over to do house inspections, I would have to break it down and sanitize it, right? And pretend, that nothing was going on, And then but imagine having a house party in a rented space that your employer owns, in a dungeon in the attic, right? And the people that came to my parties didn't know this. This was me. This was on me, okay? But what that meant was everybody that came to that party, I personally vetted and trusted they wouldn't arrive early, okay? Because the only thing I'd been taught was what House Phoenix did. You don't arrive early, you arrive in vanilla attire, you change once you're in your house, you play. What goes on in the house stays in the house. You don't talk about it when you leave the house. Period, the blanking end. If you ever want to be invited back, you do not talk about it once you leave the house, okay? Yeah, I was doing this, okay? And then, I didn't know the politics in Albany. I still don't know the politics in Albany. I don't know that I want to know the politics in Albany. But I will say somewhere along in that year's time, the first year I was there, I was leasing this house from the College of St. Rose. And we were having play parties once a month in the attic. Didn't out anybody. The college, to my knowledge, didn't know I was doing this. Okay? That's, in my book, phenomenally discreet. That I pulled that off. Okay, and this is with security people walking around. The security patrol walks down Partridge on their routes. Okay, so at any rate, back to the story, because nobody told me I had a time limit. Somewhere in that year, some of the local leaders decided that what Albany Stocks and Bonds was doing or not doing wasn't enough, and they wanted more, so Apex kind of formed, okay? And my fire and Little Walt was Little Walt because there was a Big Walt. Does anybody know who Big Walt was? Anyone remember him? Master Sparks. Master Sparks was one of my better friends for a while. I don't know what happened to him, but he was really good with electric play, but that's really on a sidebar. But at any rate, another group formed. So now you had two groups, right? And I was just doing my own thing. I was just having a house party.
What was your house party called?
At that point, it wasn't House Mermaid. It was just Dex and Barbie was hosting a party. And we would invite people from the munch, But I was getting to know a few people, okay? But this was all still real dangerous. In the big scheme of things, it was still real dangerous because there was nothing that was going to say that a college kid wasn't going to walk into a munch and have a curiosity about anything in leather. And there were some people from SUNY Albany that we would bump into at munches. But to my knowledge, there wasn't anyone from St. Rose that I was aware of. No. So toward the end of the year, the college informed me that they were going to do something different with the house and that I was going to have to find a place to move. Okay. So we researched. We found a house out in Hoosick Falls. It was a 2-story Victorian, technically it had 5 bedrooms, but I consider it 4 bedrooms. It's about 2,500 square foot of living space, but it had a full attic. If you've ever been in an attic of a Victorian, the peak was 11 feet tall. When you're standing on the deck and looked up, it's 11 feet to the eaves, right? You go down in the cellar, and it had an old water cistern that someone had knocked the sidewall out of it. And when you walked down in the bottom of the water cistern and looked up, the floor joist was 14 feet over your head. And this cistern was like being in a 6x8 room. Okay, and it hadn't collected water in many, many, many years, okay? But the sidewalls were about chest high, so you could look over and look down in the cistern, okay? So, the gears are clicking, right? This is the house. This is going to be House Mermaid. So this was bought in the spring of 2001, and over that summer, I had made some friends over the course of the year going to Munch's. I had a friend up, oh geez, my memory's getting bad. What's north of Albany, going up the thruway? Anyway,
Saratoga, Latham,
north of Saratoga. Okay.
West Falls, Queensbury.
Queensbury, up in the Queensbury area. Todd was a trade carpenter. Anybody know Todd? Samurai? You know Samurai? Remember him? Samurai was a trade carpenter who worked for a company that made stage props for Broadway, which is a great job, right? Real skilled job. The problem is when there's a long run on Broadway, the trade carpenters all get laid off and are unemployed. So he was laid off the summer of 2001, but he was my friend. I said, you come over to the house and help me build these dungeons and I'll feed you every day. So he would hop on his motorcycle, come over to the house, and we built 2 dungeons. 2,500 square foot of dungeon space between the attic and the cellar. The attic had 4 crosses. Every collar tie down the rafters was a hard point. We had stocks up there. The off-season room that was cedar lined became the wax room, the Sibian room. The cellar had a pony stall in the cellar. The cistern was a playroom. I painted it white. We put handprints, very much like your handprints, on the walls. I painted the cross white and I blacklit it. So you could look over the walls of the cistern, down into the cistern, and you were looking at a blacklight scene. But you could do suspensions because the floor ties or floor joists were 14 feet over the floor. So Todd actually did suspensions in this cistern, right? So over the course of that summer and building, we were in the attic when 9/11 happened, building equipment. So over that summer, we looked at the community, and my goal in building House Mermaid as a professor was to kind of insulate myself from the community, to be honest, so that I could continue to follow my leather journey, continue my kink, but not out myself, okay? So all of my parties were very closely vetted. Now, by some standards, you would say they weren't that closely vetted, but they were people that I knew that I'd met at a Munch that I felt that I could at least trust them enough to give them a trial. Well, what was the trial? You had to arrive at the house on time, not early, or within the first 30 minutes. You had to arrive vanilla, okay? You couldn't arrive, like one time I had a fellow, anyone remember Ski? Ski showed up with his leather vest on, not that bad, but he had his leather vest on and he had a flogger hanging out of his back pocket. It was the last party he got invited to. Did he do anything really wrong? Not by a lot of standards, but by the standards that I had requested for attendance at that party, that was a no-no. Okay, I just couldn't take that chance, okay? It wasn't that I was trying to establish an elite group, it was that I was trying to protect everyone that came to the party and protect myself, okay? Protect my career so that I could continue to pursue my kink. So literally from fall of 2001 to 2006, we hosted a monthly play party the 3rd Saturday of every month, completely blinders on, irregardless of what any group or anybody else was doing in upstate New York at House Mermaid, okay, for those 6 years. Over that summer, I met with about 17 different people that I felt like I could trust, took them to dinner, paid for their dinner, asked them if they wanted to be a part of the family. And so we ended up at one point, we had what I would call 17 extended family members. I say extended family members because there were not sexual relationships with the headmaster of the house with all these people. That's not my kink. But they were like family. What that meant was every month they got invited to the play party, period, okay? We had some rules. What were the house mermaid protocols? What goes on in the house stays in the house. Perfection, unattainable, yet in all we do, we seek it. Respect for each other first and those around us second. Integrity within ourselves first and our family. Dignity as kinky individuals. Excellence, a most excellent house. I'm gonna need some water. And to wear your mermaids with pride. So really, we didn't ask anybody except if there were family members when they went to a munch or went to a kinky event or were around other kinky people and you were at least at level 2 protocols and it was okay to wear leather of some sort to wear your mermaids. The males in the family were given a mermaid pin to go on their vest. The females had a pendant with a double-sided mermaid on it, which happens to be the image for my back patch. It was two mermaids kissing with their backs arched in kind of an almost impossible pose because you just don't bend that way. People don't bend that way, but mermaids do. So at any rate, that was the rules. Probably the most important one was what goes on in the house stays in the house. So literally the only people that were invited that were not invited back were people that somehow broke that protocol, you know. And it wasn't that we didn't like them and that we didn't actually love them. It was just that we didn't feel like we could take a chance on, okay? So over the course of the next year, I kind of backed out of going to munches. Okay, and the house ran kind of unusual by today's standards. House Phoenix was all I had to go on. House Phoenix never charged anybody anything for anything they did. Okay, and the way I looked at it is when I went somewhere with my submissive, I was going to spend about $40, $20 a person to get in the door plus the gas or wherever I was going, right? Well, when I hosted a party, and I looked at all the paper goods and the costs of the party, it was costing me about $40 a month to host a party, right? But everybody there was vetted. Family members could invite people that they were willing to vet because I trusted the 17 family members, okay? And back in the day, I was using a service called Evite, which is kind of like a fancy listserv. I would invite people off Evite because you got to remember back in the days of 14.5 baud per second modems, right? We were at Yahoo Club level. Yahoo Clubs was a disgusting little program. Then Yahoo Clubs bought out one groups and they became, Yahoo was an acquisition company. So Yahoo became Yahoo Groups then. Clubs merged into groups, right? Groups was still disgusting. So I didn't want to use that. I used Evite, never took any money through Evite. So what did it cost to come to a play party at the house other than your discretion, not talking about what went on in the house, arriving vanilla, changing once you were inside, leaving vanilla, and in the village of Hoosick Falls with the neighbors and the police, not outing the party. We did that for 6 years. Even had Master R over there. Ooh, okay. He arrived and didn't bring any toys. That was an interesting visit. So we did that. But is that enough? No, it's not. It's really not enough. I mean, one play party a month? Give me a break. I mean, I live to throw my whip. So we figured out we could budget and afford to go to a convention somewhere in the country once a month. And that's how you get this many pins, roughly. That's one way, right? And then, according to my contract, and I'm not going to get into the details, this is the infamous 3-ring binder. So every family member got a 3-ring binder, okay? So in the 3-ring binder, anybody remember Castle Realm back in the day? Okay, Castle Realm was a good BDSM resource site. There's still, if you search for Castle Realm, you can still find a mirror site with all the information up there, even though it's not live and active. I took their play checklist and came up, modified it, because it was really tailored toward just male-female play. It was male dominant, female submissive. And as the lifestyle was more open and and enabling than that, I felt like that checklist needed to be modified. So I came up with my own checklist. That went in the 3-ring binder. Submissive positions, slave positions, that went in the 3-ring binder. So everyone that was a family member got a 3-ring binder. Voice commands, obviously at some point in my journey, I have to walk away, guys. Obviously at some point in my journey, I had an infatuation with worship and homage. That's why my leathers have a codpiece, thanks to Savage Leather. I got over that at some point, but early on I had an infatuation with worship and homage. You could say it's a guy thing. I had rules for Barbie, okay. I had a training edict. There were other things in here that were kind of nice. Some people can say they've actually met Lady Hugs. I don't know that that's something you brag about, but I can say I actually met Lady Hugs. I have a copy of her unpublished BDSM reference guide. I also have a copy of her caning manual, which I think that's actually is available online. So this was just like the infamous 3-ring binder. A reference guide. There's not a guide to leather. There's not a leather Bible, believe it or not. Don't let anybody make fun of you for your journey, because everybody's journey is different, okay? When I entered in Hampton Roads, I was only there about 1.5 years, and I learned as much as I could, and I was involved as much as I could. But when I moved to upstate New York, there probably was a gay male leather underground that I wasn't aware of, okay? But as far as I was concerned, the organizations that existed when I got up here weren't what I was used to, okay? And there was nothing wrong with them. They were great and great people, and I love all the people that were in those groups, but it wasn't what I had experienced the first 1.5 years, okay? So when House Mermaid came about, and we did that for those 6 years, I mean, I've actually was told I was old guard. I'm like, no, I'm not old guard, my goodness. But we were trying to be honorable, to have integrity, to not out anybody inadvertently, and we really weren't trying to create an elitist society, although people that didn't get invited to the parties might have felt that we were. But I did try to, over the 6 years, invite most of the people out of the community, as long as it was someone that we felt like we could trust. We weren't trying to be exclusive. So, she walked out so we could talk about her. Along that journey, I decided I needed a will. I was worried about, I even have some videos on leather wills, right? It's just something, as you get a little seasoned in the lifestyle, you start thinking about, right? At some point, the ticker's gonna quit ticking, everyone's going to pass on to leather heaven. What happens to your leather and all your stuff? Because we collect stuff, right? Right? Biker, you got stuff. Lots of stuff, right? What happens to all that when you're gone? Okay. I got a match set of whips out in the car that are $1,100 for 2 whips. Okay. What happens to those whips that the thong looks like a black python eating a rattlesnake? The rattlesnake's the handle. What happens to that leather when I'm gone? And Moodstone has no clue who made it, how many plats it is, anything about it, right? So I decided I needed a will. Okay, so that was running on one sidebar, but on the other sidebar, we had hosted Dante out in the 6-year period to have whip workshops, and we did some stuff down at one of the gay clubs down on Central, and he did a show and taught some workshops, and he was out to the house for a house party. That was the biggest house party we had, in that normally we tried to cap the parties at about 35. We had 65 people in the house that night, and I was just like, we don't want the police to show up. But one of the things Robert told me that stuck with me, that I to this day espouse, is he said, follow the whip. Okay. Well, you might not want to follow the whip because you like fire play. You might follow the flame, right? But it's that idea. Whatever your passion is, you have to follow your passion. Okay. Well, my passion was the whip. I do a lot of things. I'm pretty good at a lot of things in the lifestyle because of the mentoring I had that first year and a half. But what I really, really, really love is throwing a whip. If I could throw a whip in a dungeon 24 hours a day, I probably would never die. But that's not possible. So, but if that's what you're following, right, then you have to stay true to that. So the relationship I was in hindsight, and I don't want to say a lot of bad things about it, but it evolved into a snoozer, in that everyone that stands for the whip responds differently. And I say a snoozer because my interaction with this particular slave was such with the whip that I could hypnotize her with the whip. I could put her in subspace and literally put her to sleep. And if she wasn't cuffed, she would have fallen down, boom, right? She had to be restrained, okay? Well, that sounds really cool. Not everybody can do that with a whip, right? But that wasn't satisfying the sadist in me. I wanted to be able to throw my whip harder and actually hurt somebody, not put them to sleep, right? And so the blast from the past, I got on Collar Me. Everybody remember Collar Me? And I was Mr. Scorpion, because Scorpion stood for sting, right? And this one pulled me out of the trash can. I ended up in her trash can. She pulled me out of the trash can and she wrote me and wanted a coffee date. And I'm an old Navy guy. I love coffee. So yeah, a coffee date. So we had a coffee date back about in 2006. And in the process of the coffee date, I find out that she's an attorney. Oh, an attorney who's kink aware. Maybe this is somebody that should do my wills. So she did. She did our wills. And I was contractually in an open relationship, allegedly, right? Until, of course, the primary found out about Moodstone, and then it wasn't pretty. So to make a long story short, the house over the period of about 6 months dissolved. The dungeons were taken down, dismantled. I moved out. I left that house, well, with that submissive. The house was in her name, went and got myself an apartment, and within a couple months, Moodstone moved in. And we started a new phase of my journey. So what I've described so far as the early years, right? Learning as much as I could about BDSM and then hosting parties for 6 years and running a kind of we'll call it a quasi-extended leather family. And going through the whole things that happened with the family. I mean, we buried 2 masters and had funerals and did the whole 9 yards with the family. So, and then starting on a new journey. Okay, so when I met Moodstone, probably within the first 6 months I met her, she said, you know, you really love teaching other people about the lifestyle. You really should be doing workshops, not just going to these conferences, because I had probably attended Thunder maybe 4 or 5 times. I'd been to BL, I'd been around. She said, you should start presenting. Okay, we can do that. So I picked the Floating World to be my inaugural demo. Why did I pick the Floating World? Because it was an educationally focused event. They had over 200 workshops, and literally, if you put in a proposal to go to Floating World, you were not going to get turned down because they just let everybody teach, okay? So I went to Floating World and taught urethral sound, dropping urethral sounds on females, because nobody was teaching that at the time in leather, okay, that I was aware of. You would see, in fact, that's how I got myself interested in urethral sounds, is all of these female domes that were mentoring me in Hampton, Virginia, they were all dropping sounds on the guys. Like that was their thing. That and CBT, right? Well, I'm a male dom. I don't do that, and I play pansexually in the dungeon, but it's just not my thing to do CBT on a guy and drop sounds. So I was watching this, and I'm like, well, if they can do that to a guy, I should be able to do that to a female with the proper training. So I bought myself a set of Hager sounds from Rainbow Rope, and I carried them around in my toy bag. And if you've ever seen a set of sounds, this like adds 10 pounds to your toy bag. I carried these things around for like 2 years, looking for someone that could teach me how to do this. And Lori's gonna have to help me. What was the name of the female that was in Binghamton that was well known?
Bambi.
No, the dominant. Bambi was a switch.
Oh, Marcy?
No. Marcy wasn't in Binghamton. She was in Utica, and she was a TG.
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, it slips me. My apology. But at any rate, there was a female in Binghamton that was well known for sounding, and I asked her at the Capitol Ball if she would teach me how to sound, and she goes, "Oh no, I can't do that. Just hand the sound to the female, and let them self-play, and you watch what they do and learn that way." And I'm like, that's not really the way I want to learn. So I kind of took that advice and didn't follow it. I just kept looking for someone that could teach me, right? Well, lo and behold, House Mermaid had 17 extended family members. And how many of you here know me? Have been in a dungeon and played and play with me before, okay? But do you really know me? We show up, we give each other a hug, we open our toy bags, and what are we there for? We play. The line forms for Bikers Fire Play, and hopefully 1 or 2 people ask me for a whip sync. But we play. But do we really get to know each other? I mean, have you ever heard any of these stories from me? And how many years have you known me, right? Quite a few, right? You haven't heard these stories because we don't take the time to share this kind of stories with each other because we're there to play. When I go to a dungeon party, I walk in, I open my toy bag, I've got my playlist set out, and I play. I have 11 scenes for Weekend of Wickedness, and it hasn't started yet. Okay, 11 whip scenes. This doesn't count doing acrylic painting on people's chest in the morning after breakfast or any of that. So am I going to get to know any of these people at WOW? No. I'm going to play when I go to WOW. That's what I do when I go to a dungeon. So how do you get to know Dex? You have to invite me to the Leather Culture Club and ask me to talk about leather, right? Otherwise, you're not going to get this because I'm there to play, okay? So I'm way off. What was I talking about?
You're talking about learning how to do sounds.
Doing sounds, right. So we had 17 extended family members in the house, and we had been having a play party every month for 6 years, and I didn't know that one of our family members was an emergency room nurse that had been an emergency room nurse for 20 years and could teach me how to sound. But she did. And so I dropped sounds on Barbie, I dropped sounds on Moodstone. I got pretty good at it. I felt confident with it. I'd been vetted by a real nurse. I got up on FetLife and looked at the sounding group, and I'm like, this is scary. These people don't know what they're doing. They need some education, right? Because they were essentially dropping dirty sounds, okay? And so, you know, and I don't want to say negative things about dirty sounds because, you know, I taught this nationally for half a decade. That was the way I cut my teeth as a national BDSM presenter, was presenting on sounding females. I would take a webcam, a laptop, an LCD projector. I would pull someone out of the audience to be the camera person, lucky person, and I would drop and we would project it where everyone could see what was going on, and I would talk people through what I was doing, and I would explain all this, the difference in clean sounds and dirty sounds, and how females can get away with doing certain procedures with a male because a male's waterworks is built differently than a female, that if you use those same procedures on a female, you're going to end up with a UTI. But if you follow the procedure that this emergency room nurse taught me, in all the years I've been dropping sounds, which is now, I started in about 2005 or 6. So almost 20 years I've been dropping sounds or have done this. I've never had anyone that ended up with a UTI. So there must be something to the way she taught me, okay? And always using clean sounds or sterile sounds when you drop with a female. But that's how I broke into presenting. It was not whips, which is what I love. It was dropping sounds on females. So I presented sounds at Thunder in the Mountain in front of 200 people, Lupercalia, Edmonton, Canada, Cinco de Mayo in Cleveland, Southeast Leather Fest, Beyond Leather, South Plains Leather Fest, you know, on and on and on and on. I've presented. And at Weekend of Wickedness, I've presented sounds. So when I present sounds and I have a whole weekend, I try to do it early, and I let the people in the audience know if there's couples or interested people and they want to be vetted into how to do it, I will have a private session with them and vet them, okay? I don't take a stipend. I've never taken any money for any of my workshops or any of the work I do in leather. If someone does get vetted with sounds, though, we use a brand new sound, and it's $10. So they reimburse me for the cost of the sound, and the sound is theirs when we're done. If they're learning, in the learning process. But I don't consider that a stipend. That's just the cost of the scene, right? So that's how I got started. So the next whole phase of my leather journey was traveling around the country with Moodstone being the demo bottom, Lord bless her, and doing everything, caning, sounds, you name it, right? You were my demo bottom. And so I don't think it was because I was such a great presenter. She's just a really hot chick. And she's got a really great tattoo on her back too, by the way. She's the only person I know that has a full back tattoo that's a whip. So that was the next phase, was presenting. And it was, we say that I try not to take risks, but I still take risks. Anything in leather is a risk, right? So I migrate my classes at St. Rose to where I'm teaching all my classes online. I was the first professor to teach an online course at St. Rose. I was the first professor to teach all of their load online at St. Rose, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what that meant was I could be at South Plains Leather Fest in Phoenix, Arizona, teaching my courses online, maintaining my courses online, and presenting at a leather conference. What I loved, okay? Okay, that meant that I could live a leather lifestyle. When I walk into the house, I could collar my submissive, I could put the padlock on the collar, and it could stay there until I got ready to go pretend in my vanilla job that I was a professor, right? So I could live those two lives, okay? So there were many times where I was teaching two jobs at once. I was teaching at a leather convention and I was teaching my online courses and keeping all of my college work done. And the only thing that would have upset that would have been if a student had really needed to see me for office hours that week. There were times I missed my office hours, but aside from missing office hours occasionally, I was a very good professor. So that was that phase. Then we get to the point where 62. Okay, I'm about to turn 62, and you guys don't know this, but every male in my family died of a heart attack in their 60s. So heart trouble runs in my family, and I am no different, okay? I'm standing here on blood thinner, and I'm on, VA did 2 cardio versions in the last 6 months on me to reset my ticker, and I'm on Tickerson. If anybody here knows what Tickerson is, you have to go on telemetry for 4 days in the hospital to have it loaded. And if you survive the 4 days and they load it, then they do a cardio version and send you home and go, you're blessed, go forth, my child. So that's where I'm at. So I take this pill every 12 hours. If I miss a pill, I have to go back in the hospital on telemetry for 4 days to get back on it. Okay, and I want to do that because I'm a veteran, it's a taxpayer expense, and we don't want to do that. We want to just take our pill, okay? So that's where I'm at. But I decided at 62 I needed to retire. So we retired to Florida, okay? When you retire to Florida, you survey the landscape. I wanted to retire somewhere where I could throw my whip, okay? So within an hour drive of the woodshed Orlando, where I can throw my whips. I'm about an hour and 20-minute drive to Club Phoenix in Tampa, if I want to go there. And now that I've been down there 8-9 years, I've gotten to know the landscape well enough that there's a couple of private dungeons that I can go play at, and there's house parties, just like there were house parties, in Virginia and New York. So there's plenty of play. I'm retired. I still like to present. I've gotten to a point though in my retirement where I'm on fixed income and I don't want to violate my own ethics. I don't want to take a stipend for presenting. I will take travel if it's too far, okay, and I just try to do things logically. right? Like we're going to visit vanilla relatives in Colorado Springs, and that's close enough to Phoenix that we're going to jaunt down to Phoenix around Labor Day and do whip walk workshops for Apex in Phoenix before we head back this way. Okay. And somebody's going, that's a stretch because it's a day and a half drive from Colorado Springs to Phoenix. But in my mind, that's close, right? Okay. You got to understand, when I went to Lupercalia in Edmonton, that weekend there was a nor'easter. They closed the Albany airport to present in Edmonton. We drove 12 hours to Cleveland. Doesn't take 12 hours to drive to Cleveland, but in a nor'easter it does. We drove 12 hours to Cleveland to fly to Denver to fly to Edmonton to present. And she thought we were on an adventure. I thought we were trying to kill ourselves. So now I'm retired, so I don't put in proposals anymore. If a group wants me, but I don't turn down invitations. Rare I turn down an invitation. I just don't put in proposals. If a group wants me, they reach out to me. Like Southeast Leatherfest last year honored me and asked me to do a 3-hour whip intensive. Typically leather conventions don't do 3-hour whip intensives. So that I thought that was unusual. Carolina Coastal Fetish Fair reached out to me to present this fall. And then I have a bunch of local groups. You can look on my profile and see, I'm busy, probably as busy now as I was before. In October, one weekend I'm in Pensacola presenting. The next weekend I'm in Tallahassee. The next weekend I'm in Jacksonville presenting. I get one weekend off in October, right? So happy. You have to have somebody to love, something to look forward to, and something to do, right? At least that's what Moodstone tells me. So that's I'm in the retirement phase of my leather journey. And you guys were kind enough to invite me to talk about my leather journey. The only thing I want to end with, though, is I don't want you to think that there's a cookbook or a Bible to follow when you follow your leather journey. Everybody's journey is going to be different. If we had enough time and we could go around the room, every single person in here would tell a different story than what I told of how they got interested in kink, right? And a different story about how you got to where you are right here. So don't let anyone look down on you and go, oh, you didn't earn your boots, or you didn't earn your leather pants, or you didn't do that right, or you didn't do this right. Well, they can go F themselves in the corner and hope they have a good time while they're jacking off, right? Because everybody's experience is different. Everybody's experience is different, and everybody organizes their groups a little different. House Mermaid was organized just to try to keep me safe for a period of time. There was nothing in those 6 house rules that came out of any leather Bible. It's just we had 17 other people agree that we could live with that. And we did for the time that we were together. And it worked for a period of time. Would it work now? Yeah, probably not. Okay? But, everything, the only constant is change. We're constantly moving, constantly evolving, and constantly learning new things. So I've kind of run out of steam. I've got everybody up to today, right? Where hopefully we get to do a little playing in a little bit.
You want to tell your people goodbye?
Oh, I'm going to tell my people goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we have
And so here
thousands of people. Now, how do I stop it?
Hey, so people, this will be on his live stream ticket up top on his YouTube channel. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, you should do it, and visit his Patreon account, because he's got great information there that you can only find there. Great information on his Patreon
Correct.
account. All
Yep.
right, thank you.
Now, how do I stop it?
You're